in Acts 22 last time, so we're starting in 23. However, as you remember from last time, they put the chapter breaks in weird places. you know, mid-sentence in the case of, chapter 21, 22, So, it's kind of the same thing happened here. So we're gonna start in Acts 22:30. So it says the next day, because he wanted to know for certain, this is talking about the commander, okay, why he was accused by the Jews, he released him from his bonds, Paul, okay, and commanded the chief priests and all their council to appear and brought Paul down and set them down before him. So, and then Paul, looking earnestly at the council, said, "Men and brethren, I have lived in all good conscience before God until this day." And the high priest Ananias commanded those who stood by him to strike him on the mouth. And then Paul said to him, "God will strike you, you whitewashed wall, for you sit to judge me according to the law, and do you command me to be struck contrary to the law?" So there are several things going on here. The commander demanded that the chief priests come and meet before him. The Romans were not allowed inside the Sanhedrin. So he demanded that they meet before him. Okay? And then we see from the next verse that Paul did not recognize the high priest. And this could have been for several different reasons why he didn't recognize him. Okay? Number one, it has been 26 years have transpired now since the Pentecost in Acts chapter 2. Remember, Paul is in Jerusalem for Pentecost. That's the feast that he's there for. 26 years have passed now at this point. So, and he's been gone. The majority of that time, he has been gone. So he may not have known who the current high priest was. Okay? And this position of the high priest was seen as a proxy position by the Romans. They were the ones that were appointing the high priest. Okay? Secondly, since they were not meeting in their own chambers, the high priest would not have had on his uniform or his priestly garment. Paul calls him out as a whitewashed wall. Okay? Jesus did the exact same thing. Go to Matthew 23, verse 27. Okay, Matthew 23, verse 27 says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like whitewashed tombs, which indeed appear beautiful outwardly, but inside are full of dead men's bones and all uncleanliness. Even so, you also outwardly appear righteous to men, but inside you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness." Now, there was a very practical reason why he was referring to whitewashed tombs. Okay? During the feast holidays, remember, it was a requirement that every male Jew showed up for several of these feasts throughout the year. Okay? And they would go through prior to the feast and whitewash the tombs. In other words, the outsides, you could easily identify them so that people wouldn't stumble onto them in the dark and therefore be defiled and not be able to get to the feast or not be able to participate and not be able to enter the temple. But they were beautiful outwardly, but on the inside they're full of dead men's bones,
So he means dead man's bones, he means they don't worship.
You're hypocrites.
spiritual.
Yeah, they're not, they're inside, they're completely dead. Paul was saying the same thing. He said, you know, you are a whitewashed wall. Because you say that you're following the law, and yet you command me to be struck contrary to the law. So you're violating the law by what you just commanded that person standing next to me to do. He says, you are a hypocrite. So then in verse 4, what's that?
That is one of the things.
It's kind of like today's entertainers and
Yeah.
politicians,
That is the main difference
media.
between Christianity and some other religions is that they teach that the change is outward. It's what you do outward, whereas Christians,
Amen.
I didn't understand what she said.
the change has to be inward.
Right.
And that's what Christ teaches. The change has to be
Right.
inward.
Right, and basically what she was saying is that, hey, the difference between Christianity and a lot of other religions is that they're teaching that it's all on the outside, it's all superficial. But in Christianity, the change has to take place inside. Because it's heart, it's all about the condition of the heart. You know, that is so prevalent. And then it said, and those who stood by in verse 4 says, do you revile God's high priest? And then Paul said, I did not, brethren, know that he was the high priest, for it is written, you shall not speak evil of the ruler of your people. So, you know, like I said, there are many, many reasons potentially why Paul did not recognize Ananias as the current high priest. Number one, they were changing all the time. Out of Josephus, Josephus writes in the Antiquities of the Jews, now he was now the third emperor, and he sent Valerius Gratus to be procurator of Judea and to succeed Annius Rufus. This man deprived Ananus of the high priesthood and appointed Ishmael, the son of Fabi, to be high priest. He also deprived him in a little time and ordained Eleazar, son of Annas, who had been high priest before, to be high priest. Which office, when he had held for a year, Gratus deprived him of it and gave the high priest to Simeon, son of Prometheus. And when he had possessed that dignity no longer than a year, Joseph Caiaphas was made his successor. When Gratus had done these things, he went back to Rome after he tarried in Judea for 11 years, when Pontius Pilate became his successor. So during that whole time, we saw during his trial, you know, that there were two high priests and there was a lot of confusion. Well, they were changing these guys over, you know, because the Romans were the ones that were appointing them. This was not being done. They saw it as a proxy position, okay, as rulership, if you will. And so they were appointing the high priest. This wasn't being done according to Mosaic law. Okay, this was strictly a political thing, and it was being done by them. So you can see, these guys didn't stay in office for very long. They were constantly, they would do something that would piss off the Romans, and the Romans said, you're out, somebody else is in. You know, and so that was constantly, it was a constant changeover. So, you know, that's one of the reasons that he would not have known necessarily who the current high priest was.
This may be off the subject here a little bit, but in verse 5 there, would that still apply to us today? Is that a literal thing? You shall not speak evil of a ruler?
I think that was part of the Mosaic law, you know, and I think that, you know, we see some of that in Ephesians and in Romans.
So we shouldn't speak evil of our
Well, it says
master or
render unto
anybody else?
Caesar that which is Caesar, okay? So, you know, and when you look at what was going on, another section of I spent a lot of time in Josephus this week looking at some of his history of what was going on. You know, because this Ananias, you know, for a long time I thought, well, is that Ananus? You know, and it's a different guy, you know. And I actually found where Josephus had made a list documenting the transgression or the transition of all of the high priests during this time. So, you know, there were 28 priests total during the time of Josephus. So I mean that was a lot.
How long a period was that? Years.
Probably 30, 40 years that, you know, he was documenting, you know. So a lot of these guys were in for a year and then out because they did something that, you know, made somebody mad. And so he started off with Ananus, Aristobulus, Jesus the son of Fabius, Simon the son of Boethius, Matthias son of Thephu, Joazar son of Boethus, Eleazar son of Boethus, Jesus son of Sick, Annas or Ananus son of Seth. Okay, and we know about Ananus because that's the one that's listed during Jesus' trial. Okay. Ismael, son of Fabius, Eleazar, son of Ananus, Simon, son of Camithias, Josephus Caiaphas, son-in-law to Ananus. So Caiaphas was the one who was actually in power at the time of Jesus' crucifixion. Jonathan, son of Ananus, Theophilus, his brother, son of Ananus, Simon, the son of Boethius, Matthias, brother of John. You know, the list goes on. There was 28 of them total. You know, so there was just a lot. There was a constant turnover in this, and so Paul would not have any way, because he'd been gone basically for the last 26 years. He wouldn't know who was the current flavor of choice. You know, and plus the fact that because they weren't meeting in the Sanhedrin, they were meeting before the commander. He wasn't wearing his priestly garment, so he would have had no way of knowing. This next part is very cool in verse 6. It says, "But when Paul perceived that one part were Sadducees and the other Pharisees, he cried out, 'Men and brethren.'" Okay, so he's gonna play one side against the other here. He says, "I am a Pharisee, son of a Pharisee, concerning the hope and the resurrection of the dead, I am being judged." Okay? Because the Pharisees didn't believe in any of the supernatural. The Sadducees didn't. The Pharisees did. And so he says, "And when they had said this, a dissension arose between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. For Sadducees say there is no resurrection, no angel or spirit, but the Pharisees confess both. So then there arose a loud outcry, and the scribes of the Pharisees' party arose and protested, saying, 'We find no evil in this man. You know, but if a spirit or an angel has spoken to him, let us not fight against God.' But then there arose such a great dissension that the commander, fearing lest Paul might be pulled to pieces by them, commanded the soldiers go down and take him by force from among them and bring him into the barracks." So the commander again has to intervene here. Okay? And, you know, he doesn't know what's going on. You know, because again, these guys are more than likely speaking Hebrew. He doesn't understand the language. He just sees all of a sudden this thing gets into a major uproar again. He doesn't quite understand what's going on. But the following night, okay, that night he's in the barracks, Paul is, the Lord stood by him and said, "Be of good cheer, Paul, for as you have testified for me in Jerusalem, so much you also bear witness at Rome." So Jesus again appears in person to Paul. We know that he had time alone with him, you know, in the Arabian desert. We talked about that last time we met. We know that Jesus appeared to Paul, you know, on the road, you know, and when he was blinded, you know. priests and the elders and says, we have bound ourselves with a great oath that we will eat nothing until we have killed Paul. Now you therefore, together with the council, suggest to the commander that he be brought down to you tomorrow as though you were going to make further inquiries concerning him. But we are ready to kill him before he comes near. So, this is a major conspiracy. So when Paul's sister's son heard of their ambush, he went and entered the barracks and told Paul. And then Paul called one of the centurions to him and said, take this young man to the commander, for he has something to tell him. And so he took them and brought him to the commander and said, Paul, the prisoner, called me to him and asked me to bring this young man to you. He has something to say to you. So, don't miss that. Paul had a sister. Okay?
Paul had a sister, my sister.
And his sister had a son. Okay? So, that's the only, this is the only place where we see this. But it's very, very likely, because remember, Paul's from Tarsus.
Okay.
It is very likely, it's a good possibility, that when Paul's parents sent him to Jerusalem to study under Gamaliel, that he was staying with his sister. Good possibility. He has a family member who is in Jerusalem. Okay, she's got her own family, and so it might very well be that she was taking care of Paul as he was growing up and he was studying at the foot of Gamaliel. Because his parents were back in Tarsus. So, don't know for sure, but it's very likely possibility, that's what was going on. So Paul's sister's son, okay, and also remember we saw earlier on that Paul was not the first one in his family to be saved. And I don't remember the exact scriptures. It was earlier in Acts, where, and it might have been his listing his sister. I'll have to go back and look at it again. But he talks about his family members, who were in the faith before him. So they were believers. It might very well be that we're talking about the same person here, or same family, same part of the family. So then the commander took him by the hand and went aside and asked him privately, what is it that you have to tell me? And he said, the Jews have agreed to ask that you bring Paul down to the council tomorrow, as though they were going to inquire more fully about him. But do not yield to them. For more than 40 of them lie in wait for him, men who have bound themselves by an oath that they will neither eat nor drink till they have killed him. And now they are ready, waiting for the promise from you. Holly, chill. And that dog. Yeah. Waiting for the promise from you. So the commander let the young man depart and commanded him, do not tell anyone that you have revealed these things to me. So he's asking, he says, hey, keep this a secret. Don't let anybody know that you've informed me of this. And then, so the commander calls for 2 centurions and says, prepare 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, 200 spearmen to go to Caesarea at the 3rd hour of the night, and provide mounts to set Paul on and bring him safely to Felix the governor. So this is a significant army. He already knows that there's 40 guys that have committed themselves to taking out Paul. Okay, he's sending him with a large group. Okay, there were about 1,000 men stationed at the garrison Jerusalem. Okay? The provincial governorship, if you will, was in Caesarea. Okay, not in Jerusalem. Which would make sense. Caesarea was a port town, you know, and so it was easier to travel, it was easier to get information to other parts of the province, and that's where the provincial palace, if you will, and the governorship was taking place. So he's sending with them 200 soldiers, plus 70 horsemen, plus 200 spearmen. That's 470 men. That's about half the garrison that is stationed at Jerusalem. Just to escort Paul back to Caesarea to the governor Felix.
That's
Yeah.
a good church.
He wants to make absolutely certain that nothing happens to Paul, you know, because the Jews, you know, he got word that, hey, this is what they're planning on doing. They're going to take, they're setting up an ambush, and they're going to try and take him out, you know. And so he's making sure that nothing happens to him, you know. And legally he was required to, you know. And he's probably a little apprehensive because remember the commander, he blew it multiple times according to Roman law. He could be prosecuted. Okay? And so he's going above and beyond now to make absolutely certain that nothing happens to Paul. You know? So, you know, he is literally sending half of the garrison to escort Paul to Caesarea. You know, 470 people. You know, plus the 2 centurions, 472. You know. So, and he wrote a letter in the following manner. Okay, Claudius Lysias, to the most excellent Governor Felix, greetings. This man was seized by the Jews and was about to be killed by them. Coming with troops, I rescued him, and having learned that he was a Roman. And when I wanted to know the reason why they accused him, I brought him before their council, and I found out that he was accused concerning questions of their law, but had nothing charged against him deserving death or chains. And when it was told me that the Jews lay in wait for the man, I sent him immediately to you, and also commanded his accusers to state before you the charges against him. Farewell. Now, notice what's missing in that letter. There's no mention of the manner in which the commander had screwed up. You know, it's strictly, hey, I'm doing my job. You know, there's absolutely no mention of the fact that he bound him, of the fact that he almost scourged him. You know, he said, hey, I'm doing my job. I rescued this man, you know, because we found out he was a Roman. We saved his life, and, you know, now we're sending him to you. You know. Yeah, yeah. Then the soldiers, as they were commanded, took Paul and brought him by night to Antipatris. Okay. So, what was the deal with Antipatris? Well, remember, Caesarea is about 50 miles from Jerusalem. Here's Jerusalem. Okay. Here's Caesarea. And about halfway in between is Antipatris.
They make that one day.
They would make that in one day. They left in left the third hour of the night, it said. And so that was about the halfway point, which would make sense as to why they went that far, okay? Because that is about the halfway point. So they brought him by night to Antipatris, stayed the the rest of the night, obviously. The next day, they left the horsemen to go on with him. So the horsemen, because remember, Paul's on a horse as well. They said, provide a mount for Paul, so they're not walking. And the rest of the soldiers returned to the barracks. They basically got him out of the danger zone. And so the horsemen, continue on with Paul. So you've got 70 now. 70 horsemen plus Paul. They're continuing on to Caesarea because they can make better time at that point. They could probably do the remaining 25 miles or so in less than a day, whereas the rest of the people were all on foot.
All the spear chuckers.
All the spear chuckers. So, that would make sense. So they continue on. When they came to Caesarea and had delivered the letter to the governor, they also presented Paul to him. And when the governor had read the letter, he asked what province Paul was from. And when he understood that he was from Sicily, he said, I will hear you when your accusers also have come. So he says, okay, I'll hear your case. We'll wait for the accusers to come, and he commanded him to be kept in Herod's praetorium. Okay? So, now it takes 5 days before Ananias and the high priest come down. Okay? But they don't come alone. They come down with the elders and a certain orator named Tertullus. Okay, and these gave evidence to the governor against Paul. So they brought with them an orator or a prosecutor, if you will. A lawyer. He's speaking. He's probably very familiar with Roman law. And he's the one that's speaking to the governor. And when he was called upon, Tertullus began his accusation. Seeing that through you we enjoy great peace and prosperity is being brought to this nation by your foresight. We accept it always in all places. Holly? No. Lay down. So we accept it. We accept it always in all places, most noble Felix, with all thankfulness. Nevertheless, not to be tedious to you any further, I beg you hear me by your courtesy. Pure suck up. That's what this guy is trying to give all these flowery words, okay, to get on the good side of Felix, and saying, hey, and Felix was not a good guy. Historically, we know that, okay, and he's definitely corrupt. And we will see that corruption in the upcoming verses, And so they continue. Says, now we have found this man a plague, a creator of dissension among all the Jews throughout the world, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. He even tried to profane the temple, and we seized him and wanted to judge him according to our law. But Commander Lysias came by with great violence and took him out of our hands, commanding his accusers to come to you. By examining yourself, you may ascertain all these things of which we accuse him. And the Jews also assented, maintaining that these things were so. Their accusations, Paul was a plague. Okay? They were attacking him personally. Creator of dissension throughout the world, attacking him politically. Okay? Now, that was especially important because remember what are the one thing that the Romans want? Peace. They want things in order all the time, So he's a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. And he even tried to profane the temple. Well, none of these accusations are true, and none of them can be proven. So then Paul gets a chance to speak. And Paul, after the governor had nodded to him to speak, answered, inasmuch as I know that you have been from judge of this nation, I do more cheerfully answer for myself, because you may ascertain that it is no more than 12 days since I went up to Jerusalem to worship. And they neither found me in the temple disputing with anyone, nor inciting the crowd, either in the synagogues or in the city. Nor can they prove these things of which they now accuse me. But this I confess to you, that according to the way, again, remember the early church was called the way, okay, which they call a sect. So I worship the God of my father. So he's saying, hey, I follow the way. I worship according to the way. Okay? So I worship the God of my fathers, believing all the things which are written in the law and the prophets. And I have hope in God, which they themselves also accept, that there will be a resurrection of the dead, both just and unjust. This being so, I myself always strive to have a conscience without offense towards God and men. Now after many years, remember Paul's been gone, 26 years have transpired. Paul's been gone the majority of that. So after many years, I came to bring alms and offerings to my nation, in the midst of which some Jews from Asia found me purified in the temple, neither with a mob, nor with tumult. They are here themselves say that if they found any wrongdoing in me while I stood before the council. Unless it is for this one statement which I cried out standing among them, concerning the resurrection of the dead, I am being judged by you this day. So Paul lays out the story. He says, hey, I was at the temple. I was purified. I was there, completing a vow. Remember he went in with the 4 men, and after the days of purification, I wasn't causing an uproar. I wasn't causing anything. I wasn't even in the city causing an uproar in the city. I was in the temple worshiping. So Paul mentions that he practices according to the way. The next verse I find very interesting. It says, but when Felix heard these things, having a more accurate knowledge of the way. Felix was very familiar with the Christian church, with the way. He says he had a more accurate knowledge of the way. So he adjourned the proceedings, said, when Lysias the commander comes down, I will make a decision on your case. So he commanded the centurion to keep Paul and let him have liberty, and told him not to forbid any of his friends to provide for or visit him. So he's told, from Felix, who's familiar with the church, what's going on. He says, keep him, let him have liberty, let his friends come and minister to him and visit with him. But Paul's still detained, if you will, but he's given a lot of freedom in this. And so, in the meantime, after some days, when Felix came with his wife Drusilla, who was Jewish, he sent for Paul and heard him concerning the faith in Christ. So he's going and asking Paul, come talk to me more about this. He sends for Paul, and they're talking. He's already had some knowledge of the way. He wants to know more. So he wants to hear him concerning his faith in Christ. Now, as he reasoned with about righteous self-control and judgment to come, Felix was afraid and answered, go away for now. When I have a convenient time, I will call for you. Meanwhile, he also hoped that money would be given him by Paul and that he might release him. Therefore, he sent for him more often and conversed with him. So Felix continues this conversation going on. He continues to bring him in. In the meantime, he's got ulterior motives, in what's going on. He's hoping to get some bucks out of this.
Bribery?
A bribery, yeah. That's exactly what was going on. Like I said, Felix was not an upstanding guy. He did a lot that was, that we're going to see, it says, after 2 years, Porcius Festus succeeded Felix. And Felix wanted to do the Jews a favor, left Paul bound, left him incarcerated, if you will. So, Felix was a pretty corrupt guy, but more importantly, what happened was he was not in command or in control of the area. This was another one of those situations where I dug into Josephus and looked at historically what was going on. Because Josephus documents all of the governors and what was going on. And Josephus says, as Felix came once into the marketplace and commanded the Jews, when they had beaten the Syrians to go their ways, and threatened them if they would not, and they would not obey him, he sent his soldiers out upon them and slew a great many of them, upon which it fell out that what they had was plundered, and as the sedition still continued, he chose out the most eminent men on both sides as ambassadors to Nero to argue about their several privileges. So remember, the Romans wanted peace. They wanted compliance. And this sedition is continuing, as Josephus says. And that could be the very reason that Felix was replaced by Porcius. Okay? Because he didn't have control over the area. Now, what's interesting is as you read on in Josephus, you find what happens with the subsequent governors, because they're all bad. You know, it says, now it was Festus, okay, who succeeded Felix as procurator, and he made it his business to correct those that made disturbances in the country. So Festus really tries to get his act together. He caught up the greatest part of the robbers and destroyed a great many of them. Okay, so he's kind of straightening things out. This guy that comes in here and acts and replaces Felix. But then next after that, Albinius, who succeeded Festus, did not execute his office as the other had done, nor was there any sort of wickedness that could be named that he had put a hand in it, but that he had a hand in it. In other words, he was involved in every form of corruption, everything. This is Albinius. Accordingly, he did not only in his political capacity steal and plunder everyone's substance, nor did he only burden the whole nation with taxes, but he permitted the relations of such that were in prison for robbery and had been there either by the Senate or in every city or by former procurators to redeem them for money. Nobody remained in the prisons as a malefactor unless they didn't give him any money. Kind of sounds like the Democrats. You know? I mean, it was a constant turnover of what was going on, and these governors were extremely corrupt. You know, Festus, actually did make an attempt, according to Josephus, at straightening things out. Okay, but he was eventually replaced by Albinius, and Albinius just went nuts. You know, there wasn't any form of corruption that he didn't have his hand directly in, according to Josephus. You know, Josephus is a good resource for us to have because we're able to see things that were going on historically, you know, that take place with all of that. So I really like having that resource to be able to go back to, you know, and be able to see what was going on. You know, Luke gives us some good insight because he gives us the specifics. He tells us, 2 years after Paul was incarcerated, that Felix is replaced by Festus. During that 2-year time frame, Felix continues to meet with Paul, hoping that he can get a handout. So anyway, I thought it was interesting. I spent a lot of time digging through the history on this because it was so interesting to me that, you know, what was transpiring. So let's close in prayer. Lord Jesus, we just thank you so much for your word. We thank